Hey guys, it's Steve. Sorry, I'm very late today. We're going to make this a real short training. I was actually at a house today showing it, and this is good for licensed agents. This is also good for non-licensed JV partners. So, what I want to cover right away is when you're doing an agreement of sale. This agreement between the buyer and the seller. There are several important things to cover, which you're using our forms, so that's fine. But on the PAR agreement of sale form, this is built into our form as a default yes, but on the PAR, it's built into a checkbox if you want it. And whenever you're representing a buyer, you always want it. What that it is you want to make sure that it's on line 700 something. I think it's section 26. So it's deep in the contract. And it says it's liquidated damage limitation is what it is. It says that if checked, which you always want to have this checked if you're representing a buyer, the buyer's liability under any circumstances is limited to the deposit. You leave that unchecked, you leave the buyer open to a possible lawsuit or other penalties. So if for whatever reason the deal doesn't happen and it's determined that the buyer would lose the deposit, it's a situation like that, which usually isn't all that likely that it's the buyer's fault, but okay, whatever. The most the buyer is going to lose is their deposit. Everyone assumes that's true. So it's not something you're going to really see a lot of sellers fight back on, but people fight back on it. So someone called in. This is a downside of doing it on the phone. But you want to make sure that's checked. Second, when you're licensed and you're doing a wholesale, this is true for any of us because I'm licensed, therefore it applies everywhere. They're important. Material facts are important. Meaning, if you see something and know something about the property or have been told to suspect something or whatever, you have to share that. You need to share anything. Material facts are a dumb definition. The definition is anything a buyer or seller might possibly have relied on in the transaction of a deal. So what that means is, in this case, with this particular house, we had it under contract for 12. We were showing it at a much higher price. That's how wholesale works. And the sellers had told us back porch is suspect. Don't use the second floor back porch entrance. Okay, that's fine. We shared that with everyone. We said, hey, here's the back porch. Looks okay to me, but seller told me to be suspect of it, so I'm telling you to be suspect of it. So all of that is important in the transaction. I had a buyer who's worked with me for years, but actually hasn't done anything through me for years. He's been doing mostly off market on his own. But he wanted to make an offer on an on market property. So he called me up and he said, hey, here's the address, here's my offer, here's how I want it written up. And so we wrote it up. And in technical snafus, that line 700 didn't get checked. And Mike is a very careful guy, thankfully. So we had to get it noted. Sorry, I've been in the car for the last 2 hours, 3 hours, so I'm a little bit restless. Anyway, so we had to get that checked off. So the process, when you're representing a buyer, and this again is licensed broker process. Will, one of our new agents who's really been hitting it pretty good, he has a buyer. He's actually driving an hour and a half to meet with this buyer at a potential house, which you guys decide. You're independent contractors, whatever. But the first thing you want to, everyone you communicate with in any substantive way, that's actually what the law says, substantive real estate communication, whatever the living hell that means. You want to, first thing is that I do when I pick up the phone with anybody talking real estate. Hey, I'm a licensed broker. I'm not your broker. I don't represent you unless you sign paperwork. I can represent you, but I don't. So just understand we have a relationship. I will be honest with you, but you are not telling me things in confidence yet. Something like that, which is nowhere near what the state wants you to say, but you're just telling them, hey, don't tell me your deep dark secrets because they aren't secrets anymore. They're mine. And then as soon as possible, you want to send them a consumer notice. We have an off-market one and an on-market one. You want to send them a CN, buy a digital signage software, which we provide, and you want to basically get them to sign it. If they don't sign it, it's not the end of the world. You've presented it, so that's good. You presented it. That's actually your legal obligation. You can't force the horse to drink the water, but you have to bring the water. You have to bring the horse to the water. You have to present the document to the client. That one doesn't do anything. It's not a contract. It's not an agreement to work together. That's simply identifying you as a licensed agent and telling them, hey, these are the roles that I can play in different transactions. It's an informational document. It's really the only document the state has that we are not allowed to touch. We literally have to take the state version and run with it. And no, it doesn't cover wholesaling, so I actually have an addendum that goes with it that covers wholesaling. The second document that we want to have happen here is a buyer. If you're in the brokerage line of work and you're representing a buyer in a traditional listed transaction, buyer agency agreement. This is where you get paid. This is the document that authorizes and requires you get paid. Without this, you may or may not get paid. It's not a guarantee. So this is where you negotiate your pay structure with the seller, or with the buyer actually, and you get them to sign that. Many often they won't sign an exclusive one. They'll sign the non-exclusive only for this property. I don't like it, but it's actually okay because the PAR now wants, the Association of Realtors wants one signed for every property anyway. I always write in there, this property and any other property is discussed or executed between the parties, something like that. So if you send them something else, there's a pre-agreement that you're going to be getting paid on it. You'll need a separate agency agreement, but you'll have that. The third thing you want to give them, if you're not using PAR documents, if you are, you're fine, is a notice of the recovery fund. And we have a form for that. Even though wholesale is not Association of Realtors, it is still covered under the state recovery laws. The recovery fund simply says that the state collects a little bit of money off each transaction. So if a broker were to lose a lawsuit, for example, and the brokerage doesn't have the money, doesn't have the insurance, there's a failure in that equation, or they went out of business, the state can use these funds to pay off, I guess, the plaintiff, whatever party was injured. And a deposit money notice, and this goes along with the agreement of sale. You give them the agreement of sale that says John and Jane are selling, John and Jane are offering to buy this house from Jim and Judy at this price. A separate document called the deposit money notice says, hey, your deposit money is going to be held in an escrow account. Another separate document says buyer estimate of closing costs. You're going through and saying, we're not the title company, we're not giving you a final answer, but your purchase price, like the lady today, buying the house for, I forget what number, we'll say 20. And I said, okay, 20 plus transfer tax, plus deed prep, plus this, plus that, plus an estimate of your title expenses, you're out the door for 24. You're just letting them know up front, hey, not sure exactly, but somewhere in this ballpark is what you're going to be paying. Somewhere like that. And there's a reverse of the equation when you're dealing with a seller. You're saying to the seller, hey, here's a seller estimate of closing costs. Same thing, consumer notice, agreement, and seller estimate of closing costs. Effectively, what you're saying is, Mr. Buyer, you're offering me 20, you're going to be paying more than 20. Mr. Seller, the offer is 20, you're going to be getting less than 20. And then there's also the state disclosure and the lead disclosure, which need to be signed, offered by the seller to the buyer, filled out by the seller, then signed by the buyer. Those are the basic structures of the thing. The main thing I wanted to cover, and I know I'm cutting today very short and I apologize. The main thing I wanted to cover is that when you're doing the agreement of sale, you want to limit the buyer's liability to just the deposit amount. Now, the last thing I want to mention is there's 2 emails that get every copy of everything you ever offer, write, get signed, or send to get signed. You always copy, and what you do in your DocuSign is you'll say, to be signed by party, to be signed by party, and then you make it in order. There's a checkbox that says send it to these emails in order. Then there's 2 emails that go on it. There's Steve at goodpeoplegoodhomes.com, and there's gpghrealty@gmail.com. Realty goes into our software for capturing documents called Paperless Pipeline. I'll show you guys that more in detail. We're making a transition over there. But the point is, we need to keep copies of everything. If it's a document, send it to gpghrealty@gmail.com and me. So, for example, you're going to have, when it's an agreement of sale, you represent the buyer. You've written it, you sent it to the buyer to be signed, and it's buyer signature, the whole package we discussed, the agreement of sale, consumer notice, all that other stuff. And then as copy to me directly, personally, and to GPGH Realty, and to the seller's agent. That way it's an automatic process. As soon as the buyer signs it, boom, seller's agent has it. And if you send it out and they don't sign it, you download the unsigned version, and I'm speaking specifically of the consumer notice now, you download the unsigned and the BAC, but you download the unsigned version proving you sent it. You literally take the DocuSign transcript or audit trail or whatever and send that to me and Realty. That way we can prove we sent it. They chose not to sign it, fine. It was proven to be sent. So that's just a little bit of liability stuff. I got the sale going on I got to get back to. I'm just sending a message to those who are on here, and we'll sign up.